You want to see what I did with this factory painted Athearn tunnel motor? Let's take a look. Hi, I'm Dan Cortopassi. Welcome to Model Showcase. In this episode, I'm going to talk about one of my Athearn HO scale SD40T-2 tunnel motors that I detailed a few years ago. So what is a tunnel motor? Well, if you're not familiar, on the Donner Pass line, there's a lot of snow sheds. And there used to be even more. I think some of them have been torn down. But basically, locomotives would go through there and the exhaust gases would make the air inside the snow shed very warm. And the engines would be start to have cooling problems sometimes. Like this is a EMD SD40, and this has the conventional EMD radiators up on the top, and the radiator fans up on the top. And that arrangement, especially with the SD45s, was causing some issues in the snow sheds. So EMD and SP got together and re-engineered the locomotives, and this was the result. This is an SD40T-2. So these engines have an intake down here, these grills, and that's where they draw in cooler air from the lower part of the snow shed or tunnel. And then the radiator fans are actually in this area. On the SD40T-2 there's 2 fans, and on the SD45T-2 there's 3. But anyway, their fans are in here and they blow the air up through the radiators and out this way. So that's the main difference, and one of the main spotting features of the tunnel motor is the unique back end. Tunnel motors also have this overhanging porch on the back and different kinds of steps on the side because of this, as opposed to the more conventional EMD step arrangement like on this model. So SP actually didn't have any conventional SD40-2s. They were all the tunnel motor variant. These engines are internally pretty much identical to an SD40-2. It's just the radiator that's different, and also they're a little bit longer. These engines had 3,000 horsepower and internally were pretty much identical to a regular SD40-2 except for the radiator section. So in the back here I have an Athearn model of an SD45T-2. These had a 20-cylinder motor instead of the 16-cylinder motor in this unit, and they produced a little more horsepower. I think it was 3,600. These two locomotives have the same wheelbase, but the main way to tell an SD45T-2 from an SD40T-2 is that the SD45T-2's cab is pushed more toward the front, whereas the SD40T-2 has this porch at the front, typical of an SD40-2. The other main spotting feature is that the SD45T-2 has 3 access doors for the radiator fans in the back instead of just 2 on each side like the SD40T-2. One other difference is that the SD45T-2s for the most part just had a regular headlight in the back, whereas the SD40T-2s had the full light package. This one, of course, has been what they call lobotomized because I'm modeling the 90s, but if this engine were in its like 1980s form, it would have more lights here. So Southern Pacific and Rio Grande were the only railroads to buy SD40T-2s new from the factory. Some of them eventually ended up on other railroads. SP was the only railroad that bought SD45T-2s new from the factory. However, like the SD40T-2, many of these ended up on other railroads later on. So for me anyway, the tunnel motor is probably the quintessential Donner Pass engine. They were made for it. That's why they existed, and I used to see them up there a lot when I was younger and was able to do some rail fanning in that area. So this model was one of the Athearn RTR ready-to-roll line, which now I think they just call Athearn. So I weathered this engine and detailed it following photographs that I found of this particular model and tried to make it look like it looked in the 90s. Back then SP was not in the greatest shape anymore, and the maintenance was a little deferred, and some of the equipment was looking pretty weather-beaten. So I think that time was not a great situation for the railroad, but it's kind of a modeler's bonanza, if you know what I mean, in terms of like being able to weather stuff and make it look really cool. I did a lot of work on the front end of the model. When I got it, it was, it had the emergency light and the oscillating light. I took those off. And this particular unit had the emergency light location plated over. SP used to either do this where they'd make a little kind of rounded fairing over where the thing used to be, or they would just leave the mounting area with the light removed. So kind of depended on the engine and which one you got. I also removed the class lights and plated them over with these lighter colored red squares, which basically I did following photographs. This engine has the Rio Grande style Burnham shops numbers and the number boards. I made my own custom decals for those, and I also made them light up. Take a look at that a little later. The ditch lights are Detail Associates castings, and I lit them up with some 603 size surface mount LEDs and my own fiber optic lenses. The front has a Details West plow. I added grab irons to it, and then I also added some air hoses. I don't think this engine had them. Athearn's released these with different levels of detail over the years, but I'm pretty sure this one didn't have that stuff, and I'm pretty sure it didn't have the uncoupling lever either, so I had to add that. So in the rear, like I mentioned, I removed the oscillating light and the emergency light, and I plated them over, I think, with BLMA parts. I don't know if those are still available from Atlas, but KV Models makes an equivalent nowadays. I also did uncoupling levers and hoses on the rear pilot. On this model, I wasn't happy with the original dynamic brake fans, so I changed them out for Canon parts. I think Athearn may have improved those a little bit in subsequent runs. I think the antenna stand was already on the model, but I did add the conduit. I also added some aftermarket wipers to this model. I think these are probably A-line ones. I don't remember if this is the original horn casting either, but if I replaced it, it was because I picked one that was closer to the photos that I found. This model has no cab interior. If I ever feel like it, I might try to put a Canon kit in it or something. I don't know how well this is showing up on video, but I did add the Canon photo etch deck kit for this, which has like the diamond plate tread. That kit also includes steps with perforations, although I didn't take out the original steps. I just glued these on top. So they don't really have the see-through effect, but that's really only noticeable if you're looking straight down on the model. I did some detailing on the trucks, like adding the spare knuckle holder and brake lines. I also added a speed recorder and cable made from brass wire on the front truck on the left side. I added some additional detailing around the fuel tank area using some aftermarket parts and brass wire to try to make it look a little more detailed under there, like a Scale Trains model. Although really there's not as much under there as it looks like. It's a little hard to see, but I added some Details West traction motor cable details on the frame here. My whole thing with underframe detailing is to do just enough to fool people into thinking that there's more. When I took out the emergency light, I used some scrap plastic to build up a fairing and then sanded it and repainted part of the nose. It's always a little bit of a challenge when you're modifying factory paint and then trying to make it look like you didn't do anything. Also on this front, I kind of weathered the nose area and then glued on these class light covers so that they wouldn't look as weathered, which is how this engine looked in photos. So when Athearn originally made these, you could see the gear tower on the truck through the grills back here. It's not super realistic, but I didn't do anything about it. I think Athearn sells a replacement truck that has the gear tower a little further forward, but I don't know if it's really worth it. I mean, unless you're looking at it at just the right angle like this, you don't really notice it. I weathered the engine with a combination of airbrushing and powders. I used some red powder to produce this discolored effect under the dynamic brake area. I imagine this was some kind of heat damage on the real thing. Again, I did this engine following photos. I also like to darken the seams between the doors with some, in this case, black weathering powder. I always use a color that's a little darker than the actual color of the model. So this is a dark gray engine, so I use black. But I really think it helps it to pop, and it makes the paint look a little more faded too. The numbers on the side of the cab on most SP engines tended to be cleaner than the road name. I guess it was important to know the number, but if the SP part got dirty, that didn't really matter. So it might be a little hard to see, but I usually weather the walkways and the deck with some dirt color powder, because I figured on the real ones that's where dirt would build up. So I weathered the roof following photos too. You can see it's kind of more blackened around the exhaust and this area, and then lighter up here. That's what I love about working from photos, is there's all kinds of stuff like that that might not occur to me, to do if I was just trying to wing it. So because I did this model a while ago, it has a Loc Sound Select in it instead of a Loc Sound 5. But I did make the number boards work independently, ditch lights work independently, and of course the headlight. So I know it's not as interesting to see this thing running on the workbench versus the module, but the module's kind of out of commission right at the moment, so had to settle for this. So overall this thing's running pretty good, even though it's been stored for a long time. I did have to open up the front truck and drop the wheels out and check them out, because there was something in there that was causing the wheels to skip when I first started running it. And it turned out it was just some foreign material on the gears, like a little grain of sand or something. I'm not sure exactly what, ballast, something, I don't know. But anyway, I got rid of that and put it back together, and then it ran fine. So I still like this model a lot. I'm looking forward to using it on the Donner layout eventually. I think it'll go pretty well with all the other tunnel motors I have from both Athearn and scale trains. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at this model with me. If you like this video, then please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned, and thanks for watching.